Hello, my name is Steven Peña and I'm going to talk about the history of the psycholinguistics and the major theories. To this, I'm going to talk about four periods: the formative period, the linguistic period, the cognitive period, and the cognitive science period. Enjoy the video. Well guys, as I said before, one of the most important periods is the first one, that is called by the formative period. So listen carefully to the explanation and take notes about the main characteristics. In the formative period, both linguistic and psychology were committed to an operationalist philosophy which derived theoretical constructs for observable data by using a set of highly explicit and verifiable operations. Structuralism was the prevalent paradigm in linguistics and defined units like the phoneme and the morpheme in terms of operational procedures. Behaviorism was predominant in psychology and also gave primacy to observable data, methodologically focusing on rigorous experimental design and statistical analysis of data. Alright, now I'm going to talk about the linguistic period. In this case, we talk a lot of this period in our lessons with the Professor Santiago. The linguistic period is characterized by the rise of transformational generative grammar in linguistics, followed by its theoretical domination of psycholinguistic research. Noam Chomsky, the originator of transformational generative grammar, successfully argued that behaviorism, structuralism, and information theory, the scientific perspectives which had oriented psycholinguistic research in the formative period, could not provide an adequate explanation of natural language. It was based on an operationalism philosophy. He further argued that a deductive approach was required and that linguistics theory has its proper domain in the underlying competence of speakers and not their actual performance. By extension, psycholinguistics also took at its starting point the study of competence, with the study of performance as a secondary activity. The centrality of grammar was taken as a basic assumption, with the sentence emerging as a primary unit in most psycholinguistics experiments during this period. Psycholinguistic studies in the 60s test whether the number and complexity of mental operations performed during processing was a function of the number and complexity of formal transformations seen in the grammatical duration of a sentence, as postulated by linguists. Because generative grammar was inherently interested in the nature of human language, there was also considerable interest in language acquisition as well as in linguistic universals. It was commonly held that the capacity for language acquisition in species specifics and it's a genetic dominated attribute for humans and humans alone. The third one is the cognitive period. That is very important in my case to refine my teaching style. The cognitive period questioned what the intrinsic capacity to learn language really means, and whether what is really brought to bear is a set of general learning principles. The major premise that underlies a cognitive approach is the dependence of language upon human cognition. The notion that language is but one of several outcomes of a more fundamental cognitive processes. The centrality and independence of grammar was rejected in favor of a view that the cognitive capacity described in grammatical accounts of competence is only one manifestation of human language and is in no way prior to or independent of other cognitive and behavioral systems involved in the acquisition and use of language. Linguistic structures are not learned independently of semantic concepts and discourse functions, and more importantly, cognitive principles must be assumed to govern the acquisition of linguistic structures Thus, although linguistic theory continued to play a role in the psycholinguistic theory and practice, the role was not as directive as before. There was robust evidence for the role or surface structure in processing but not for transformations. And finally, we have the fourth period. This is the cognitive science period. This is very interesting because it's about what are going to do in the future and is connected with other important subjects like philosophy, neurolinguistics, and etc. The last and most current period in the psycholinguistics is one marked by the development of cognitive science as an interdisciplinary activity. Psycholinguistics is now involved in a larger field of inquiry, that is, the nature of knowledge, the structure of mental representations, and how these are used in mental processes like reasoning and decision making. Current psycholinguistic theory also reflects a considerable theoretical variety in both psychology and linguistics, but there is nonetheless a tremendous amount of the truly interdisciplinary activity. More than ever before, researchers are very much aware of developments in adjacent fields, exhibiting research goals and a breadth of knowledge not confined to a single discipline. Linguistics and psychologists can no longer afford to ignore scientific answers in the other field which impinge on research problems in their own field and the explanations they offer for them. And that's all, guys. Thanks for watching. Leave me your comments below and I'm going to answer your question as soon as possible. Bye!